Over to Europe. Some European countries are looking forward to creating a green passport, also known as a vaccine passport. But in France, public opinion shows opposition to the idea. NTD's David Vives has more.
People in bars and restaurants, without masks. Over the past few weeks, pictures from Israel showing the end of lockdown are making the French wonder when life will be back to normal again. But people are divided over the vaccine passport or green passport. This passport would be delivered to vaccinated people, and it would allow them to enter venues, bars, restaurants, etc.
I don't think people are suspicious, they are prudent. They have all the right to be so on this.
Other European countries are seeking to implement the green passport or similar measures. The UK government is studying proposals for COVID status certificates. And Denmark will use an app which would be linked to a secure digital ID system, listing an individual's health records and test results. In France, a poll by a government agency shows more than two-thirds of the public is very opposed to the measure. Dr. Louis Fouché says this is simply violating human rights.
Some said at one time we should do a passport for people infected with AIDS. It wasn't done. It wasn't done for any disease. The COVID passport must not be done. This goes against human rights. Where will it end? Do you smoke? Don't go to the butcher. Do you drink? Don't go to the hairdresser. You have a sore throat? Don't go to school. Wise people, philosophers, historians warned us in the past that this is how dictatorship begins.
Moreover, the green passport hasn't been recommended by the WHO. A spokesperson of the organization said on Tuesday they are still not sure whether the vaccine prevents virus transmission. She also mentioned concerns over equity on the measure. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Quarantine-free travel between Australia and New Zealand will begin on April 19th. But New Zealand's Prime Minister warns travellers to be prepared for disruptions in case there's an outbreak.
A travel bubble between New Zealand and Australia will kick off next week. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told reporters on Tuesday that quarantine-free travel will begin on April 19th for the neighbouring countries. She said that conditions for the bubble had been met and will give economic recovery a boost. New Zealand broadcaster One News said that the bubble is expected to run on a state-by-state basis and would restrict travellers from certain areas if there is an outbreak. The two countries faced mounting pressure from businesses to reopen borders. The plans for the bubble were previously shelved after sporadic outbreaks in some Australian cities. But both countries have managed the pandemic better than other developed nations, after closing their international borders to non-citizens relatively early during the health crisis. Australia has just over 900 deaths, and New Zealand recorded 24 deaths from COVID-19.
Australia on Tuesday said it had not yet received more than 3 million doses of previously promised AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. It is leaving a major hole in its nationwide inoculation drive.
Australia has not received 3 million doses of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine that was previously promised to the country. The acting chief medical officer confirmed the major gap in Australia's vaccination drive to local media on Tuesday. Australia only vaccinated 670,000 by the end of March, falling dramatically short of its previous pledge of 4 million first doses. Australia began vaccinations much later than some other countries due to low case numbers. Most of Australia's near 26 million population will receive the AstraZeneca vaccine, as local production of the vaccine also steps up. About 2.5 million doses have been locally produced so far. The country's pharmacy guild has also blamed the slow rollout on a lack of coordination between the Australian national government and states.
Now, the governor of Texas issued an executive order prohibiting vaccine passports. Texas and Florida are the first US states to ban them. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the details.
That is why I issued.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed an executive order Tuesday. It prohibits state agencies from creating a vaccine passport requirement. It also ensures individuals can receive services without having to show a receipt of a vaccination.
Government should not require any Texan to show proof of vaccination and reveal private health information just to go about their daily lives.
Abbott's move comes just days after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis issued a similar order. DeSantis is looking for the Florida legislature to make a law banning vaccine passports permanently. The concept of needing proof of vaccination has become a hot topic. Civil liberties groups say that would be a significant government overreach. Texas is about to surpass 13 million vaccine doses this week.
Those shots help slow the spread of COVID, reduce hospitalizations, and reduce fatalities. But, as I have said all along, these vaccines are always voluntary and never forced.
Abbott's order also targets organizations that receive public funds. They're no longer allowed to force customers to prove they've gotten the vaccine in order to receive service or enter any location. Abbott says Texans' lives are returning to normal as more people get the vaccine. The Biden administration said it will not require Americans to carry vaccine passports. And the White House said there will be no federal vaccination database. Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Americans' privacy rights should be protected so that these systems aren't used against people unfairly. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Vaccine passports are hotly debated in the US too, while New York State has launched such a digital certificate. But would businesses use them? NTD's Miguel Moreno explores this question.
New York State's rolled out their Excelsior Pass, one of those curious vaccine passports. You have to get vaccinated against COVID-19 or test negative to attend games at major stadiums or arenas.
Okay, so here's the app. This is the Excelsior Pass wallet app, and this is where your information would be. So it's an interesting concept. It's very futuristic, but I'm wondering how many small business owners, if they could, would turn away potential customers because they haven't been vaccinated for COVID-19 or haven't tested negative.
The general manager of this restaurant told us he'd use the passport and vet his customers.
I think, yes, I love to use a passport personally because, it's better for employees, better for all the customers inside the restaurant especially, so that they're secured.
But he says he's got to think about money too, and this could come at a cost. The NYC Hospitality Alliance told us restaurants are barely making it out of the pandemic, so they can't afford to turn down the unvaccinated population. Plus, they say there are logistical and legal issues to consider. The owner of K Rico South American Steakhouse says he would use passports to vet his customers, but wouldn't turn customers away, like people who turn down the vaccine for spiritual or religious reasons.
I would implement the contact tracing, let's say like the analog way of doing things, of, writing it down and taking temperatures, and obviously don't want to offend anybody for their beliefs or anything. I mean, everybody has a right to.
So far, COVID-19 vaccines are limited to certain age and work categories. The Biden administration says they'll be available to all adults by the 19th of April. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Israel's president on Tuesday announced his decision to mandate Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to form a new government, giving Netanyahu a new lease on his political life. It follows another inconclusive election.
A sceptical president invited Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday to form a new government after yet another inconclusive election deepened political stalemate in Israel. The country's longest-serving leader now faces the tough challenge of enlisting enough allies for a governing coalition. Under law, Netanyahu will have 28 days to do so. Announcing on television his choice of Netanyahu, President Reuven Rivlin cast doubt on any candidate being successful. The announcement came as his corruption trial entered its second day in a Jerusalem courthouse.
Rivlin said that under Israeli law, Netanyahu, as the current prime minister, was not disqualified from being assigned the task, despite his indictment on corruption charges. Charged with bribery, breach of trust and fraud, Netanyahu has denied any wrongdoing, accusing the prosecution of an attempted coup.
This is how they try to overthrow a powerful prime minister from the right. This is what a coup looks like.
Israel's election on March 23rd was its fourth in 2 years. It ended with neither a Netanyahu-led right-wing and religious bloc nor a prospective alliance of his opponents capturing a parliamentary majority. Continued deadlock could ultimately result in a new election.
Tossed in the frying pan or on a barbecue or eaten raw with melon in the summer, Halloumi cheese is delicious and versatile. Now it's receiving the protected designation of origin status from the EU.
Later this month, the European Union is set to formally give halloumi cheese the protected designation of origin status. That's according to the Ministry of Agriculture in Cyprus. The move will give halloumi producers in Cyprus the sole right to sell the rubbery cheese in the EU.
Unfortunately, in recent years, many countries tried to copy us. So the registration, this result that we have today, will help very much.
When Petro started selling halloumi about 40 years ago, his company used only 250 litres of milk a day. Now it compresses 250 tonnes of milk per day, employing over 200 people and exporting to 40 countries. He expects more demands for halloumi after the protected status takes effect in October.
Both we cheesemakers and the state will be called upon to find solutions, how to produce more halloumi than we have been producing today in order to cover the needs in the market.
Historical accounts suggest the production of halloumi started in Cyprus as early as around 1500. At a popular restaurant in Nicosia, Cyprus's capital, halloumi is served in its simplest form.
A lot of tourists come here looking for it. They don't know it and ask for it to find out what it is. They only know it by name, and as a product they ask to eat it, to try halloumi, and from what I see they really like it.
Dairy products are the country's second most valuable export after pharmaceuticals and has grown 20% annually for the past 5 years.
Now, most people are right-handed, and now a recent study suggests that dogs, or man's best friends, are more likely to be right-pawed too.
An analysis of 18,000 dogs in Britain found nearly 75% had a preferred paw when reaching for food. Of these, researchers found that, like humans, right-handedness or right-pawedness took preference. Around 60% of dogs with a preferred paw favoured their right side. That's compared to around 90% of the human population who are right-handed. The data comes from the BBC's Test Your Pet survey, in which dog owners were asked to place a treat inside a tube and observe how their pet tried to get it. The trial was repeated 3 times. Researchers from the University of Lincoln say having a preferred side, known as lateralization, is beneficial as it makes animals more efficient at tasks. They also noted that female dogs are more likely to be right-pawed than male dogs, and elderly dogs tend to prefer the right paw more than younger dogs. But left-handedness remains in the minority. Studies show only 10% of humans are left-handed, but here about 40% of dogs were left-pawed.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees.